Struggling single dad finds German Shepherd puppy in backpack. Years later, the note leads to a millionaire girl. On a freezing winter night, a struggling single dad found a worn-out backpack at a lonely bus stop. Inside, he discovered a trembling German Shepherd puppy and a tear-stained note that simply read, "Please take care of my best friend. I'll be back someday." Years passed. The girl who wrote that note became a millionaire. But before the success, before the fame, she had left behind a piece of her heart. What she didn't know was that the man who found her pup would one day steal her heart too. This is a story about broken dreams, second chances, and the loyal bond that changed 3 lives forever. Stay till the end, because sometimes love comes back in the most unexpected way. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The backpack pack at the bus stop. The sky hung heavy with winter clouds, dull and grey, as though the stars had chosen to hide tonight. Streetlights flickered against the cold air, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. Snow had fallen earlier that evening, just enough to crunch underfoot, but not enough to be called beautiful. Daniel pulled his threadbare coat tighter around himself and looked down at his daughter, Emma, who sat beside him on the frozen metal bench. She was wrapped up in a puffy jacket 2 sizes too big, her tiny fingers poking out of the sleeves as she held onto the straps of her worn-out school bag. Her cheeks were flushed red from the cold, her nose runny, and her eyes tired, but still filled with that unshakable wonder only children carried. "Daddy, is the bus going to come soon?" she asked, voice shivering. Daniel exhaled, watching his breath fog in front of him. "It should have been here by now, sweetheart. Maybe it's just running late." They had been sitting there for nearly 40 minutes, the wind nipping at their skin, the night growing colder by the minute. Daniel had worked the whole day at the small library downtown, stacking books, assisting elderly patrons, and fixing the heater that always seemed to die in the children's section. Emma had spent her day at the community daycare next door, colouring paper snowflakes and waiting for her dad to pick her up. Daniel was exhausted, the kind of tired that clung to his bones. But even in the middle of all that fatigue, he felt that quiet, aching warmth he always did when he looked at his daughter. She was the reason he kept going, the reason he never let the pain of his past, the broken dreams, or the weight of failure pull him under. And just as he was about to pull Emma into his arms to keep her warm, she suddenly pointed. "Daddy, look!" Daniel followed her gaze to the corner of the bus stop shelter. Under the bench, pressed into the shadows, was a black backpack. It hadn't been there before, or maybe he just hadn't noticed it. He stood up slowly and approached it. The zipper was partly open, and something inside moved, a slight shift like a soft tremble. Daniel hesitated, then crouched, reaching for the zipper with cautious fingers. He opened the bag the rest of the way, and his heart sank. Inside was a German Shepherd puppy, thin, shaking, eyes wide with fear and confusion. Its fur was dirty and slightly matted, its ribs faintly visible through its side. Someone had left it here, abandoned it. But not without words. Tucked into the front pocket of the backpack was a small, creased piece of paper. He opened it gently, careful not to tear the fragile fold. It was written in looping, youthful handwriting. "Please take care of my best friend. I will come back one day. Lily." Daniel stared at the note for a long moment, his throat tightening. There was something raw in that message, something painful. Not careless abandonment, but desperation, a last resort. Emma knelt beside him, peering into the backpack with wide eyes. "Is that a puppy?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, it is." The puppy looked at Emma, then at Daniel, and let out the smallest, weakest whimper. "We can't leave him, Daddy," Emma whispered, already deciding the little creature's fate. "He's all alone." Daniel looked from the trembling puppy to his daughter, and back again. He didn't have money. He didn't have space. He could barely afford groceries as it was. But how could he walk away? He knew what it was like to be left behind, to feel forgotten. And he couldn't let this little life be another casualty of someone else's pain. He reached into the bag and lifted the puppy gently into his arms. It was cold, far too cold for something so small. Emma immediately wrapped her scarf around the puppy, her instincts as kind as her father's. The dog tucked its nose into the wool, eyes fluttering shut for a moment of rest. In that single gesture something shifted. Something soft and invisible passed between the three of them, a bond forming in silence. Daniel looked back at the note once more, then folded it carefully and placed it in his coat pocket. He didn't know who Lily was. He didn't know why she had to let go of her best friend. But her words felt heavy, real, like a promise etched into time. As the late bus finally turned the corner, headlights sweeping over the lonely stop, Daniel stood with his daughter at his side and the puppy cradled in his arms. That night, something changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but like a whisper in the snow. They named the puppy Shadow. Emma said he looked like he came from the night but had light in his eyes. And from that day forward, Shadow became family. He slept at Emma's feet every night, followed Daniel from room to room, and barked protectively whenever the wind rattled the windows. His presence filled the spaces where silence once hurt. He brought comfort on days when Daniel's hands shook from stress. He made Emma laugh again after the tough days at school when kids made fun of her thrifted shoes. They didn't have much, but they had love. And now they had Shadow too. What Daniel didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that this moment at the bus stop, this single act of kindness would ripple through time in ways he never imagined. Because one day, Lily would return. Not just to reclaim her puppy, but to find something she never expected to lose, and someone she never knew her heart was waiting for. A father's burden, a heart that never quits. Daniel wasn't born into a world of comfort or stability. In fact, life had tested him from the very beginning. He lost both his parents in a car accident before he could even speak in full sentences. The only person who stepped forward to raise him was his grandmother, an aging, gentle woman who lived off a small pension and believed in prayer, hard work, and the healing power of books. Their little apartment had peeling wallpaper, creaky floorboards, and a single heater that coughed more than it worked, but there was love there. His grandma would make soup from scratch, even if there wasn't much in the fridge. She'd wrap Daniel in 2 blankets when the winter wind howled outside, and every evening she'd read to him from old novels and library castaways, her voice creating magic out of thin air. That's where Daniel first learned how to dream. And dream he did. From the time he was 10, Daniel had one goal: to serve in the US Army. He admired discipline, loyalty, purpose, things his small life seemed to lack. He trained harder than most kids, joined every community fitness event he could, read about strategy and honor like he was studying for something far more sacred than a test. But dreams, Daniel would learn, sometimes break before they take flight. 2 weeks before his final army entrance exam, just days before he was to be evaluated for physical endurance, Daniel was hit by a speeding motorbike while helping an elderly man cross the street. The accident left him with a minor concussion, but worse, it damaged the vision in his right eye. His medical report disqualified him on the spot, and just like that, his dream dissolved. Treatment was possible, but expensive, way out of reach for someone who barely made it through the month. He tried working odd jobs to save up, but reality hit harder than he ever expected. Hospital bills piled up, his grandmother's health declined. He spent what little savings he had on her medication, food, rent. Eventually, Daniel took a job at the local public library. It was quiet, modest, and paid just enough to survive. He shelved books, fixed broken chairs, helped kids find stories, repaired old typewriters. It wasn't what he imagined his life would be, but he made peace with it. And that's where Sophie entered his life. She came in one rainy afternoon, drenched from the storm, looking for a specific book on French literature. Daniel helped her find it, made her laugh when he offered her a dry towel from the staff lounge, and somehow, something sparked. Sophie was different. She was confident, well-spoken, clearly from a family that hadn't missed meals or worried about winter heating bills. But Daniel never let that intimidate him. His calm demeanor, sincerity, and quiet intelligence pulled her in. Their relationship unfolded in moments that didn't look like much on the outside, but meant the world to them. Coffee breaks between shelves, long walks after closing time, laughing under flickering street lamps. He taught her how to find beauty in simplicity. She introduced him to art, music, and soft-spoken poetry. For a while, love felt enough. Even though their worlds were different, they built a small bridge between them. But bridges aren't always strong enough to hold the weight of reality. As Sophie's pregnancy progressed, the weight of Daniel's financial struggle became more visible. He worked extra shifts to pay for prenatal vitamins. He walked instead of taking the bus to save fare. He skipped meals when bills came up short. And while he tried to make her feel safe, Sophie began to unravel. She wasn't cold-hearted. She just wasn't built for scarcity. She had lived a life where problems could be solved with a check, where money shielded you from discomfort. Watching Daniel stretch himself thin to the point of collapse frightened her. It wasn't what she envisioned for her child or herself. So one winter morning, hours after Emma was born, Sophie left. No fight, no drama, just a note on the hospital table. "I'm sorry. I can't do this. You're stronger than I'll ever be. Take care of her." Daniel never hated her. He just never understood how someone could leave something so pure behind. From that moment on, he was a father, and nothing else mattered. He held Emma through every sleepless night. He learned how to mix formula while skimming overdue book reports. He juggled shifts, took on freelance proofreading work, repaired old laptops in exchange for diapers. Every time she cried, he whispered, "It's okay, I'm right here." He never once complained. Not to anyone. Not even to himself. Because Daniel carried a quiet kind of strength, the kind that doesn't need to be seen to exist. He didn't get medals. He didn't get applause. But he showed up, every day, for Emma. And when he found the German Shepherd puppy at that bus stop, something changed in him. It was a reminder, maybe from fate, maybe from God, that life could still surprise you, that love didn't have to come from where you expected, that even abandoned things, even broken beginnings, could bloom into something beautiful. Emma adored the puppy instantly. Named him Shadow because of how he followed them like he'd always belonged. Daniel watched the way the dog curled up next to Emma's feet at bedtime, how his presence made their tiny apartment feel more alive, warmer. In many ways, Shadow became a mirror, another lost soul, left behind by someone who couldn't afford to stay, another life in need of shelter and patience. And Daniel knew how to give both. He kept the note from Lily tucked in a book near his bed. Not for any reason he could explain. Just something about it felt sacred. A reminder that someone out there had trusted him, that he was still capable of receiving trust, even from a stranger. He didn't know what the future would hold. But for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt like his little family of three, him, Emma, and Shadow, was exactly where they were meant to be. Bolt, the missing piece of their family. They named him Bolt, because Emma said he had lightning in his eyes. It was her idea, and Daniel didn't argue. The puppy, though shivering and unsure at first, had started darting around their small living room like he'd been waiting his whole life to be there. His paws slipped on the hardwood floor, and he crashed into furniture more times than they could count. But Bolt didn't care. He was home. That night, as snow drifted softly against their tiny rented house and the heater made its usual clicking protest, Emma insisted Bolt sleep in her room. Daniel agreed, though he kept the door cracked just in case. He stood in the hallway longer than necessary, watching the little bundle of fur curl beside his daughter's bed. Emma had one small hand resting on Bolt's back, as if afraid he might vanish like a dream. But Bolt didn't vanish. From that night onward, he became her shadow. He followed her to the bathroom when she brushed her teeth. He waited outside her bedroom door during nap time. When she ate her cereal in the morning, he sat politely beside her, tail wagging, hoping for a few drops of milk. And when she giggled, really giggled, the kind of laugh Daniel hadn't heard in months, it was always because of Bolt's antics. Chasing his own tail, barking at the toaster, getting stuck under the couch and crawling out with dust bunnies on his nose. Daniel would sometimes catch himself smiling without meaning to. It was strange, really, the way one small dog had shifted the mood of an entire home. Bolt wasn't just a pet. He was an energy, a spark. The missing rhythm in a symphony Daniel had been trying to play alone for too long. And though Daniel had been living day by day, counting coins, dodging late bills, measuring pasta portions, something inside him started to shift too. Bolt didn't know about rent notices or maxed-out credit cards. He didn't care that Daniel wore the same winter coat from 5 years ago, or that his boots had worn soles. Bolt only knew that Daniel was kind. That Daniel shared his food, stroked his ears gently, and let him sleep on the couch when Emma had a fever. In a world that demanded so much from Daniel and gave so little back, Bolt asked for nothing, but gave everything. And that kind of love changes a man. Daniel began waking up earlier, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Bolt needed morning walks, and Emma liked joining them. They'd walk to the small park nearby, the three of them bundled in scarves and gloves, watching their breath fog up like tiny clouds. Emma would toss sticks, and Bolt would chase them with dramatic flair, tail wagging like a flag. Sometimes Daniel forgot the weight on his shoulders, forgot about the debts, the loneliness, the dreams that once slipped through his fingers. In those moments, all he saw was his daughter laughing, cheeks pink from the cold, and their dog bounding through snow with the heart of a lion. It felt like family, real family. And the note, well, Daniel hadn't forgotten about it. He'd read it more times than he'd admit, folded neatly in his wallet, the ink slightly smudged, the paper soft at the edges. It stayed close. Please take care of my best friend. I will come back one day. Lily. The handwriting was simple, delicate, young, but full of hope. Daniel didn't know who Lily was, but the idea of her lingered like a quiet hum in his thoughts. He wondered what kind of person would give up a puppy like Bolt, what kind of life she must have had to make that choice. There was pain in it, he could feel that. Pain wrapped in love. He'd catch himself thinking about her late at night, when Emma was asleep and the house fell into its quiet rhythm. He'd imagine a girl, maybe 16, maybe 20, sitting on that same bus stop bench, whispering to the dog before slipping away into the night. Did she cry when she left him? Did she look back? Daniel respected her, whoever she was. It took courage to let go of something you love in the hope it would find something better. And Bolt had found them. Emma, despite her young age, understood that. She hugged Bolt tighter than her favourite plush bear. She drew crayon portraits of the three of them and taped them to the fridge. In each picture, Bolt stood proudly beside her, tongue out, tail high. Their bond was instant, but Daniel's was quieter. It grew slowly, day by day, like vines wrapping around an old fence. Not dramatic, not loud, but deep and rooted. When Daniel came home from his library shift exhausted, Bolt greeted him like he'd returned from battle, licking his hand, circling his legs, nudging his coat pocket like he somehow knew a snack might be hidden there. It didn't matter how little money Daniel had or how hard the days were. When Bolt rested his head on Daniel's lap while he read late into the night, it was enough. Enough to feel like he was still doing something right. Sometimes, when Emma was asleep and Bolt lay beside him on the old couch, Daniel would run his fingers through the pup's soft fur and whisper, "You were meant to be here, weren't you?" Bolt didn't answer. He didn't have to. One evening, as Daniel made dinner, canned soup and toast again, Emma tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy," she said, eyes wide, "do you think Lily will ever come back?" Daniel paused, spoon in hand. He looked over at Bolt, who sat near the heater, head tilted. "I don't know, sweetheart," he said gently, "but I think wherever she is, she'd be happy knowing Bolt is safe." Emma nodded slowly. "If she does come back, do we have to give him back?" Daniel knelt down to her level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I think, if Lily ever comes back, we'll tell her the truth, that Bolt became part of our family. And sometimes," he said with a soft smile, "when people love something enough, they're happy to see it loved by someone else too." Emma wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered, "We're a good family, right, Daddy?" "The best one," he said, holding her close. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Bolt grew from a shaky little pup into a strong, loyal dog. He started recognizing Emma's school bus before it turned the corner. He barked when the mailman came, but never chased. He learned how to open the back gate latch with his nose and how to nudge Daniel awake when he overslept. Daniel began noticing small changes in himself, too. He walked with more energy, talked with more confidence. He even applied for a small promotion at the library. Nothing fancy, just a slight bump to help with groceries. He started smiling more. Bolt had reminded him of something he didn't even realize he'd lost. Purpose. Not the kind that comes with medals or recognition, but the quiet kind. The kind that grows from love and responsibility. The kind that forms when you look into the eyes of your child and your dog and realize they trust you with their whole hearts. Daniel may have lost his dream of the army. He may have been left behind by Sophie. He may have fought through more dark nights than most, but he hadn't quit. And now, with Bolt curled beside Emma each night and waiting by the door each morning, Daniel felt something rare, hope. Even if Lily never came back, her choice had changed their lives. And Daniel would never forget that. 5 years earlier. Absolutely, here is your story exactly as you wrote it, with no changes to the wording. Lily's goodbye and the promise to return. 5 years earlier. The city lights blurred behind her through the tears she refused to let fall. Lily stood at the edge of the icy sidewalk near the bus stop bench, her hands trembling inside the sleeves of her worn-out coat. Her heart thudded in her chest like it wanted to escape. Her backpack, his backpack, sat at her feet. Zipped up gently, not to trap, but to keep warm the only living thing left in her world that still believed in her. Inside it, her German Shepherd puppy shifted, letting out a soft whimper. "Shh," she whispered, kneeling beside the bag. Her breath fogged the air as she opened it slightly, just enough for his dark eyes to meet hers. "It's okay, baby, just for a little while. Someone good will find you." Her fingers fumbled with a folded piece of paper, creased and slightly damp where her tears had touched it earlier. The note wasn't poetic. It wasn't perfect, but it was everything she could give him. "Please take care of my best friend. I will come back one day." She kissed the top of his soft little head, brushing her fingers along the tips of his ears, trying to remember the warmth of every cuddle, every paw pat, every time he looked at her like she was the only person in the world who mattered. And she whispered through clenched teeth, "I promise. I'll come back for you." Then she stood up and walked away. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Because if she did, if she saw his confused little face one more time, she would have broken. And she had nothing left to give. No apartment, no money, no family that hadn't turned their backs when she lost it all. Just a shattered dream, a crushed bank account, and a dog she couldn't carry into the shadows of her broken plans. Lily had once believed she'd be someone important. At just 18, she'd launched her first fintech startup with seed funding, a spark in her chest, and a promise to the world that she'd shake the ground under their feet. By 19, her name had made it into one of those top 10 young founders to watch lists. She had a modern apartment, investor meetings, speaking gigs. The buzz around her idea was electric, and then, just as fast as it came, it all unraveled. A data breach she didn't foresee. Clients pulled out, investors panicked, code glitches, media backlash, and a partner, someone she trusted, who ghosted the company the second things got rough. Within weeks, everything Lily had built turned to dust. The apartment, gone. The accounts, empty. The reputation, tarnished. And with nowhere to go, she'd ended up sleeping in her car for 2 months, with only one heater that worked half the time, and a puppy curled in her lap, trying to keep her heart from freezing over. That puppy, Bolt, had seen her through everything. She named him after the animated dog in the Disney movie. It made her smile when she still had the energy to. He'd lick her cheeks when she cried quietly at night. He'd bark at strangers who came too close when she parked in sketchy lots. He gave her warmth when the cold crept in and reminded her she wasn't invisible. But eventually, even her car got towed. The shelters she reached out to didn't allow pets. Her friends had moved on, none of them willing to take in a girl with nothing but debt and a dog. So she made the hardest choice of her life. She whispered goodbye to the only soul who hadn't abandoned her, and left him with a note and the last ounce of hope in her body. But that moment didn't break her. It fueled her. Because when you give up something you love for its sake, a fire starts to grow where pain once lived. Guilt mixed with love. Loss mixed with fight. And that fire, it doesn't go out easy. The very next day, Lily walked into a co-working cafe with nothing but an old laptop and $5 borrowed for a cup of coffee. She pitched a new idea to anyone who would listen, wrote emails, begged for meetings, watched tutorials, learned new frameworks, rebuilt her network, one reply at a time. She picked up freelance jobs, coding at night, designing by day. She slept on floors, shared apartments with strangers, walked miles when she couldn't afford a bus, and every time she felt like quitting, she remembered his eyes, his ears, his tiny whimper when she zipped up the bag. She wasn't going to be the girl who gave up twice. By the time she turned 22, she had a new platform up. Smaller, leaner, safer. She did every role herself. Customer support, back-end, marketing. She ran webinars for free, made tutorial content, hustled through every hour of daylight and some of the night. By 23, it gained traction. By 24, investors started calling her this time. They didn't remember her crash. They only saw the success, the resilience. The media started using new labels: comeback queen, resilient tech genius, the girl who rebuilt the empire. But for Lily, none of that mattered. Because every win she got reminded her of the one promise she hadn't fulfilled yet. I'll come back for you. Now 25, she sat in a sleek office with a skyline view, her company healthy, her name clean again, her new app helping thousands. But every morning, she looked at the photo on her desk. It wasn't of a trophy or a tech award. It was a picture of a little German Shepherd puppy, curled up in the corner of a duffel bag, the moment she'd secretly taken before she zipped it for the last time. And every night, she asked herself the same question. Where are you now, Bolt? She'd searched quietly at first. A few online posts, a Craigslist ad. She donated to shelters under fake names. She asked people at that old bus stop if anyone remembered a pup found years ago. But this year, on the anniversary of that cold winter night, something in her heart shifted. She stopped her assistant at work and said, I need a week off. I'm going back to where I left him. I'm going to find my dog. The girl looked confused. You mean a new one? No, Lily said softly. The only one that ever mattered. She flew out that weekend, back to the city she once drifted through in silence. She walked the streets that had once broken her. She stood in front of that same bus stop bench and felt the weight of her old life press against her chest. And this time, she wasn't homeless. She wasn't broken. She was here to keep her promise. The comeback nobody saw coming. The world only saw the headlines. Youngest female tech CEO raises $30 million in Series B round. From homeless to headliner, Lily's story shocks Silicon Valley. Freelance Bridge hits 10 million users in under a year. But behind the lights, behind the accolades, behind the boardroom smiles and carefully curated speeches, Lily still carried a quiet ache that no victory could silence. Her office was glass-walled, overlooking the city she once drifted through like a ghost. The conference table was polished. The staff was elite. Every day was fast-paced, strategic, efficient. The startup she'd built, Freelance Bridge, a streamlined platform connecting independent workers with clients, was now a household name. It helped millions find work, earn honestly, and build lives. It was the exact platform she'd needed 5 years ago when she had no resume, no address, no help. And now it was her gift to the world. But even success has its silences. It was a Friday evening when she opened that drawer. She hadn't meant to. She was looking for an old pitch sketch to share with a mentee. But instead, her hand brushed against something softer than paper. Something familiar. She pulled it out gently. A folded photograph, worn around the edges, slightly curled with time. Her breath caught. Bolt. His eyes looked up at her through the image just as they had the last time she saw him. Warm, trusting, unaware. Beneath the photo lay the note, "Please take care of my best friend. I will come back one day." Her handwriting was shaky, barely legible in places, but the promise was clear. It always had been. She hadn't thought of that exact night in months, maybe years. Life had been too fast. But now, in the quiet hush of her modern office, the memories rose like waves. The way his tiny body trembled in that backpack, the way she almost turned back, the way she didn't. She swallowed hard and sat down, the photo and note between her hands. Some things you don't get over. Some things you fix. That night, instead of calling her driver or heading home to her downtown apartment, Lily opened her laptop. Not for a pitch, not for a business plan. She opened a blank social media post. She didn't even overthink it. For once, she didn't tailor her words, she just wrote from her heart. This is Bolt. I found him when he was just a baby. He saw me through the hardest time of my life, when I had no home, no job, no hope. But when things got too dark, I did something I never forgave myself for. I left him behind so he could have a better life. I've never stopped thinking about him. I don't know if he's out there, but if anyone has seen this dog or knows where he might be, please let me know. I want to bring him home." She attached the photo. She hit post. And then, for the first time in a long time, she cried. She didn't expect much, maybe a few likes, a few kind comments, but the internet had a strange way of carrying stories, especially ones wrapped in redemption. Within 2 hours, her post was trending. Within 4, it had crossed 1 million views. By morning, the hashtags were everywhere. /find Bolt, bring him home, Lillian Bolt. People reposted the photo across continents. Artists sketched it, kids painted signs, animal shelters tagged her, news outlets picked it up. CEO searches for lost dog from her homeless days. Strangers wrote in. I remember seeing a post about a German Shepherd in a backpack years ago. There's a man in our town with a dog that looks just like him. We found a note like this once, folded under a bus stop. Some were false leads, some were dead ends, but one comment changed everything. A user named BookDad455 wrote, "There's a guy named Daniel in my town who's been raising a dog just like this for years. Found him at a bus stop in the snow. Said there was a note too. He lives with his daughter, calls the dog Bolt." Lily's heart froze. She read it twice, 3 times. Her fingers flew. "Where is this?" she typed. "Can you connect me? What town? What library?" Her assistant saw her typing furiously and peeked in. "Everything okay?" Lily turned, her eyes wide and glassy. I think I found him." The town wasn't far. 2 hours by car. A small community on the outskirts of the city. One of those places where everyone knew everyone else's names and stories. Lily went alone. No cameras, no PR. Just her, the photograph and the folded note in her jacket pocket. The road into town was lined with bare trees and sleepy shops, a coffee place, a general store, a park that looked half frozen, and a small library with a crooked sign. She parked across the street and just sat. For a moment she felt like the girl she once was. The girl who wandered these kinds of towns with a backpack and a dream she could barely carry. And now she was back. But this time she had something to give. She walked into the library just before closing. The place smelled like old pages and worn wood. Peaceful. The kind of peace she hadn't known in years. A man stood behind the desk, checking out books for a child. He looked up briefly and smiled. He was tall, worn sweater, tired eyes, but kind, familiar in a strange way. "Hi," she said softly. "Evening. Looking for anything in particular?" he asked, polite. She nodded slowly, then pulled the photo from her pocket. "I'm looking for him." The man's hand froze mid-reach. He stared at the photo. The silence stretched long. Then he smiled, slow, stunned, sad all at once. You're Lily, she nodded. "And he's with you?" she asked. "Every day," he whispered. The silent watcher. It began with a name whispered by chance, passed from one media contact to another, Daniel, a single father in a quiet town, a librarian, and most importantly, the man who now lived with a German Shepherd that looked strikingly familiar. Lily sat motionless as she stared at the screen. It was a blurry photo from a local article about a community reading event. A man, a little girl, and a dog that made her breath catch in her throat. The shape of his ears, the way he leaned protectively near the child. It had to be him. It had to be Bolt. For a few minutes, she did nothing. Her phone screen dimmed, the world around her blurred. Her past collided with her present so fiercely that it knocked the air out of her lungs. That dog, left in a backpack on a frozen night, was alive, safe, and cared for. And somehow, the weight she had carried for 5 long years didn't feel so impossible anymore. But Lily knew she couldn't just walk up to Daniel's door and say, "Hey, that dog is mine." She wasn't even sure what she wanted from him. Bolt had become part of another family, one that seemed stitched together by love and hardship. She owed them more than just a knock on the door. She owed them respect. She owed them time. So she booked a quiet motel in that sleepy town and stayed hidden. For the first few days, she simply watched from afar. Every morning, Daniel would walk his daughter Emma to school. The girl clutched a book or two in her tiny hands, often skipping, always smiling, and always just a step behind them, walked Bolt, calm, proud, like a soldier assigned to protect them both. Daniel looked tired but not broken. His clothes were simple, his pace steady, and when he reached down to fix Emma's coat or pat Bolt's head, it was with a tenderness that stirred something deep in Lily's chest. She followed them once to the small public library where Daniel worked. The place had worn carpets and sun-bleached curtains, but it was alive with community. Kids laughed in the corner while elderly patrons sipped free tea and read newspapers. Daniel greeted everyone with a kind nod or a soft word. He shelved books, repaired bindings, organized events for children, his presence like a quiet balm on the worn soul of that library. Lily didn't mean to get involved. She told herself she would watch for a week, maybe 2. But something inside her craved more. Maybe it was the way Bolt's ears perked up at the sound of Emma's giggle. Or how Daniel stopped to share his sandwich with a stray cat outside the library one afternoon. Or maybe it was how that little girl, full of light, leaned her head on Bolt's shoulder while reading, like he was her anchor in the world. So one day, with a borrowed name and trembling hands, Lily walked through the library's doors. "Hi," she said, offering Daniel a smile that masked her racing heart. "I just moved to town. I'm looking to volunteer somewhere, maybe help with reading programs." Daniel looked up, a little surprised but not unfriendly. "We could always use more hands," he replied. "I'm Daniel. This place runs on kindness and strong coffee." And just like that, she became a part of their world. She told Emma her name was Clara, a name she had loved from an old childhood book. Emma took to her instantly. Within a week, she was asking Clara to read fairy tales with her and bring cookies whenever she visited. Lily made sure to bake her favorites, soft chocolate chip, just how Emma liked them. Bolt recognized her scent, she could tell. The first time she petted him, his tail hesitated, then wagged, and he rested his chin on her knee. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away. She didn't speak to him like she used to, not yet. But she whispered apologies with every gentle stroke of her fingers through his fur. Over the next few months, Lily and Daniel became friends. They shelved books together and co-hosted story hours for children. Sometimes they'd talk during slow afternoons, sipping lukewarm coffee in the break room. Daniel would share bits of his life, his dreams of the army, his accident, the woman who walked away after giving birth to Emma, and how that little girl became his entire reason for surviving. Lily would listen, nodding, biting her lip to keep from crying. She'd never met anyone like him. So humble, so real, so full of quiet pain, yet never bitter. And Daniel, he didn't know why this new volunteer Clara felt different, why her laughter made the library feel warmer, why his daughter clung to her hand with the ease of someone who felt safe. He didn't question it. He welcomed it. Because for the first time in a long time, it felt like life wasn't just about surviving anymore. It felt like healing. One Sunday, Lily joined them for a walk in the park. Emma clutched her fingers on one side, Bolt trotted on the other. The breeze was soft, and the sky stretched like blue silk above them. "This is nice," Daniel said quietly, watching Emma toss a stick for Bolt. "Feels like the world finally slowed down." Lily nodded, her throat tightening. She wanted to tell him everything. About the night at the bus stop, the note, the years she spent rebuilding herself brick by brick, so she could come back not just for Bolt, but for herself. For redemption. But it wasn't time. Not yet. So she stayed in the shadows of their daily routines, helping, loving, watching, until one day Bolt fell sick. It was sudden. A fever, no appetite, and then a whimper that broke Daniel's heart in the middle of the night. Emma cried. Daniel panicked. They rushed him to the local vet, the same place Lily had secretly donated to weeks earlier under an alias. As they sat in the sterile waiting room, Daniel held Emma tight and whispered stories into her hair about how Bolt was a brave dog, a good dog, and how he would never leave them without a fight. Lily watched from across the room, unable to stay away. Finally, the vet assured them it was treatable. A stomach infection, nothing fatal. But they needed to monitor him closely. Daniel's hands shook with relief. His eyes brimmed with tears. "I can't lose him," he whispered. And that night, Lily sat beside Bolt's bed in their home, gently brushing his fur. Daniel had finally invited her in, trust, unspoken but understood. He looked at her like a friend. Maybe something more. Emma had already declared her the bestest cookie lady ever. Lily looked at the man sitting across from her, worn but noble, and at the little girl asleep on the couch, and said the words that had burned inside her for years. "Daniel, I have to tell you something." When Bolt fell sick, it started with something small, hardly noticeable at first. Bolt didn't rise as quickly that morning. Usually he was the first one up, nudging Emma awake with a warm nose and a playful tail thump against her bedpost. But on that cold grey morning, he lay still, head resting heavily on his paws. Emma was the first to notice. "Daddy," she called softly from her room. "Bolt's not moving." Daniel was in the kitchen, pouring hot water into a chipped mug. His heart skipped a beat. He set the kettle down without finishing and hurried to her room. Bolt's eyes were open, but dull. When Daniel called his name, the dog's ears twitched, but there was no excitement, no tail wag. He tried to sit up, but whimpered and slumped back down. Emma's eyes welled with tears. "Is he okay?" Daniel crouched beside the bed and ran his hands gently over Bolt's side. His fur felt too warm. His breaths a little shallow. "He's just tired, sweetheart," he said softly, forcing a calm smile. "Maybe he ate something that upset his tummy. We'll take him to the vet, just to be safe." But inside, Daniel was spiraling. He remembered the first time Bolt had come into their lives, how he'd filled a hole neither of them had even realized was there. Bolt wasn't just their pet. He was family. He was comfort on the hard nights and laughter on the quiet days. He had grown up beside Emma, protected her, shared their home, their secrets, their silent moments of both joy and grief. Daniel wrapped Bolt gently in an old fleece blanket and carried him to the car, Emma climbing into the back seat, clutching Bolt's favourite toy, a chewed-up rabbit with one ear missing. The local vet clinic was only 10 minutes away, but it felt like a lifetime. Emma sat silently, eyes on Bolt's rising and falling chest. Daniel gripped the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. At the clinic, they were ushered into a room with soft lighting and posters of smiling dogs on the walls. A young veterinarian named Dr. Ramirez came in, offering a kind smile. She examined Bolt carefully, her brow furrowing just slightly. "He has a high fever," she said gently. "Looks like a severe stomach infection. It's not uncommon in older dogs. He'll need fluids, antibiotics, and rest. We'll keep him here for a night or two to monitor him." Daniel's chest tightened. Emma sniffled beside him. "Will he be okay?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dr. Ramirez nodded. "I believe so. You brought him in just in time." They left the clinic with an empty back seat, Bolt's absence filling the car like a void neither of them could speak about. Emma rested her head against Daniel's arm on the drive home, silent tears running down her cheeks. He squeezed her hand gently. That night, after Emma finally drifted off to sleep, curled up on the couch with her stuffed rabbit, Daniel sat alone in the quiet. The house felt wrong without the soft padding of paws, the occasional bark, the loyal presence that had become their daily rhythm. He sat in Bolt's usual spot by the front door, holding the old note they'd kept all these years, the one that came with the trembling pup in the backpack. "Please take care of my best friend. I will come back one day, Lily." He read it again and again. His hand trembled. Without realizing it, tears slipped down his face, not the loud, heavy sobs of devastation, but the quiet, aching kind. The kind that only surface when something you love deeply is hurting. The kind that carry years of memories. He remembered the days Bolt chased shadows in the yard with Emma, the times he stood protectively in front of her when loud strangers passed, the nights he curled beside Daniel when the world felt too hard to carry. "Please don't leave us," Daniel whispered to the quiet room. "You've saved us more times than I can count. We're not ready." From the corner of the room, someone moved. Lily had come by earlier to check on them, under the guise of dropping off soup and Emma's favourite cookies. But she hadn't left. Not really. She'd sat silently in the corner armchair while they talked about Bolt. She'd watched from the shadows of their grief. And now, seeing Daniel's quiet breakdown, something inside her cracked open. She stepped forward, softly, slowly. Daniel looked up, startled to see her still there. Her eyes were red. Her lips trembled. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. Daniel wiped at his eyes, confused. "Clara?" She took a breath. "That's not my real name." He blinked. The room seemed to tilt slightly. "My name is Lily," she said. "The girl who left Bolt at that bus stop. That was me. Silence fell thick and humming. Daniel didn't speak. Couldn't. He just stared. Lily continued, her voice shaking. 5 years ago, I lost everything. My company, my apartment, everything I built. I was young and proud and stupid, and when I had nowhere to go, I couldn't bear to let him suffer with me. So I left him. But I promised I'd come back. I just didn't think it would take so long. She looked at the floor. I never stopped thinking about him. I built a new life. I became someone again. But the one thing I never forgave myself for was leaving him behind. Daniel slowly stood. Emma stirred slightly on the couch, then settled again. "You've known this whole time?" he finally asked. "Not the whole time," she said. "I found him through a friend in media. Then I found you, and I didn't know how to say it. You and Emma, you gave him a real home. I just wanted to see if he was okay. And then I stayed, because I saw what kind of man you are, what kind of father you are, and how deeply you love." Daniel looked down at the note in his hand, the one he had kept like a relic. He looked back at Lily, really looked at her, and then without warning he stepped aside and motioned to the couch. "Come sit with us," he said, his voice hoarse. Lily nodded, quietly crossing the room, and for the rest of the night they sat together, no longer strangers bound by silence, but people joined by love, regret, and something fragile but real. Bolt wasn't just the dog that brought them together. He was the heart that healed them all. "I'm the girl who left the note." The room was still, save for the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Daniel's hands rested limply in his lap, the weight of Bolt's fragile health hanging heavily between them. Lily kneeled beside him, her movements gentle, her eyes filled with a mix of remorse and something deeper, something vulnerable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world outside seemed to blur into the background as Lily placed her hand over Daniel's. His hand, rough and calloused from years of struggle, felt warm against her own. The quiet comfort of it was almost too much for her to bear. "Don't be afraid," Lily whispered, her voice barely audible, but it felt like a lifeline. "I'm the girl who left the note." Daniel froze, his body going still as her words hung in the air. He turned to look at her, his eyes wide with confusion, disbelief, and something else that he couldn't quite place. It was as if he were hearing a truth he'd known for years, but hadn't been ready to face. The weight of her admission sat heavily between them, and for the first time in years, Daniel felt his heart beat faster, not out of fear, but out of something raw and open. You're the one who left him?" Daniel managed to ask, his voice hoarse and broken. He wasn't sure whether to be angry, relieved, or simply lost in the flood of emotions that washed over him. "You left him at the bus stop with that note, the one that changed everything." Lily nodded, her eyes softening with the weight of her own regret. She drew in a shaky breath, struggling to find the right words. "I was young, and I was lost," she began, her voice trembling. "When I left him, I didn't know what else to do. My world had fallen apart. My startup failed. I lost everything, my home, my security, everything I thought I had. I had no choice but to let him go." She paused, as if considering whether to continue. Daniel didn't speak, his gaze fixed on her, and he could see the pain in her eyes. Pain that mirrored the anguish he'd felt when he first found Bolt, shaking and abandoned in that cold bus shelter. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was giving him a chance at a better life. One where he wouldn't have to suffer with me," she continued. "But the moment I walked away, I realized what a mistake I'd made. Every day, every night, I thought about him. I thought about you too. What kind of person would take him in? Would you love him as much as I did? Would you keep your promise to him, the one I made in that note?" She swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking deep into her chest. She looked down at the note, still clutched in Daniel's hand, the edges frayed with time and wear. "I wrote that note with shaking hands. I didn't know if I could come back, but I swore that if I ever could, I would find him again, and I would make things right. But it wasn't just about finding Bolt. It was about finding the person who had taken him in. Someone who would love him the way I couldn't. Someone who would care for him and for the little girl who needed him just as much." Daniel listened in silence, his chest tight. He could hear the truth in her words, the raw honesty that resonated in every syllable. Her voice had softened, the hard edges of her past slowly being chipped away as she shared the depth of her regret, the guilt that had haunted her for years. "And then I saw you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I saw you and Emma, and I knew, without a doubt, that you were exactly who I had hoped would find him. You were everything I couldn't be. You loved him. You gave him a home. You gave him something I couldn't." Lily reached out, her hand brushing the edge of the note in Daniel's palm. Her fingers lingered there, soft and trembling. "I didn't come back for Bolt. I came back because of you, because of how you loved him, and because of how you loved Emma." Daniel's heart swelled, the words hitting him harder than any physical blow. He hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected the girl who had left them to stand before him now, a woman shaped by years of pain and determination. Her confession, raw and vulnerable, opened a door he hadn't even realized he'd closed. Lily's eyes searched his, looking for something, understanding perhaps. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't looking for approval. She was simply offering the truth. Daniel's throat tightened as the weight of her words settled in. He looked at her, not with anger or resentment, but with a quiet understanding. He had known that Bolt's past wasn't a simple one, that there had been a story behind his arrival. But to hear it from Lily herself, to hear the pain in her voice, made everything feel more real, more fragile. The silence stretched between them again, but this time it was different. It wasn't the uncomfortable silence of an unknown past, but the heavy silence of shared understanding. Daniel opened his mouth, but words failed him. His emotions were too tangled, too complicated to unravel in the moment. Instead, he simply reached out, placing his hand on hers. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. It was the first step toward healing, toward forgiveness, toward a new chapter. "You don't need to say anything," Lily whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. "I know it was hard for you. I know it wasn't easy, but you did it. You gave him a life. You gave Emma a life. And I don't even know how to thank you for that." Daniel's heart swelled again, and he finally spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't have to thank me," he said quietly. "I've never needed thanks. I just did what was right. For him, for her, for all of us." Lily looked at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You're more than I could have ever hoped for." For the first time in years, Daniel felt his chest loosen. It wasn't just the weight of his struggles that had lifted, but the weight of his own self-doubt. He had never thought of himself as someone deserving of praise, let alone love. But sitting here beside Lily, who had given up everything and yet still found her way back, it was as though everything that had been broken inside him was finally coming together. "I couldn't protect him the way I wanted to," Lily added softly. "But you did. You did, Daniel. And for that, I'll be forever grateful." Daniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he just sat there, his hands still resting on hers, the connection between them growing stronger with every passing second. He didn't need to say anything else. The understanding between them was enough. And in that moment, Daniel realized that some wounds, no matter how deep, could heal, not through grand gestures, but through simple acts of love and care, through the quiet moments of understanding that made the difference. Healing together. Bolt's recovery was slow but steady. Every day brought a small sign of progress, a wag of the tail, a soft bark, the way his head would rest against Emma's lap just a little longer than the day before. The vet visits, though expensive, were made easier thanks to Lily, who quietly paid every bill without expecting a word of thanks. She just wanted Bolt well again. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel didn't feel like he was carrying the weight of everything alone. There was a strange kind of peace in the way things unfolded after Lily's revelation. She didn't rush into their lives like a hurricane. She came in like a spring breeze, soft, gentle, patient. She brought home-cooked meals when she knew Daniel had been too busy to eat. She helped Emma with her school projects, showing up with glitter glue, ribbons, and patience. She laughed easily, listened quietly, and when Daniel found himself lost in thought, her silence felt like comfort instead of absence. Emma took to her like sunshine takes to flowers. One day, out of the blue, Emma called her Aunt Lily. No one prompted it. No one explained it. It just happened. Natural, effortless, like Lily had always been a missing piece they hadn't even realized they were waiting for. Lily had blinked back tears when she heard it. She didn't correct her. She just bent down, hugged Emma close, and whispered, "I'd be honored." And Daniel? Well, Daniel didn't know what to call what was happening inside of him. He'd spent so long bracing for storms, he didn't quite know what to do with sunshine. He wasn't used to being looked at like he mattered, not just as a father, not just as someone doing his best, but as a man, as someone worthy of love. Lily never tried to change him, never asked him to be anything other than who he was. She saw the man who patched Emma's worn-out backpack with duct tape, the man who woke up early to pack her lunch and stayed up late fixing library shelves for overtime pay, the man who once walked miles in the snow just to make sure Bolt had the medicine he needed. She saw all of it, and she stayed. And Daniel? He started to believe maybe that was okay. Maybe he didn't have to be rich, or perfect, or powerful. Maybe being kind, consistent, and present, maybe that was enough. One cool evening, the three of them walked home from a quiet dinner at their favorite diner, Daniel carrying leftover pancakes in a small brown bag, Emma skipping ahead, Bolt trotting slowly behind on his leash, his energy returning day by day. As they passed the old bus stop, the one where Bolt's journey had started, Lily paused. Daniel stopped too, looking back at her. The setting sun spilled gold across her face, catching the warmth in her eyes, the wind softly tugging her hair across her cheek. She reached out and took his hand. It was the first time she'd done it without hesitation, and Daniel let her, his fingers curling around hers, grounding himself in the softness of that moment. "This is where it all started," she said quietly, glancing at the worn bench. "Where I left him. Where I left everything." Daniel didn't speak. He just stood beside her, his presence steady. "I used to think that letting go was the worst mistake I ever made," Lily continued. "But now I see. Maybe it led me to exactly where I was meant to be." He looked at her then, really looked at her, not just the woman who had left Bolt, not just the successful CEO, not just the girl with the regret and the note, but the woman who came back, who stayed, who cared, who gave love without asking anything in return. Lily turned toward him fully, her voice soft. "Daniel, I need to tell you something," he nodded. "I don't want to take him back," she said, her eyes flicking to where Bolt was lying at Emma's feet, tail thumping lazily. Daniel's brow furrowed slightly. "He's already home," Lily said. "With you, with Emma. I see the way you care for him. I see the way he looks at you. You saved him, and you let him save you too." She took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around his. "And I don't want to walk away again, not from him, not from you. I want to build that home, with both of you." Daniel felt a lump rise in his throat. He'd been through so much. Abandonment, hardship, scraping by with every last ounce of strength he had left. And now here she was, not offering him rescue, not offering him riches, but offering to stay, to build, to believe in something with him. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. He looked down at their hands, then up at her. And then toward Emma, still laughing with Bolt, her joy effortless, like everything in her world was exactly where it should be. "I never knew what love without conditions felt like," Daniel said quietly, "until you." Lily blinked back tears. He squeezed her hand, and for the first time in years, Daniel didn't feel like a man barely surviving. He felt like a man beginning again, with someone who saw him, accepted him, and wanted to walk beside him. They stood there a little longer, watching as the sun dipped behind the hills. No more running. No more pretending. Just two people who had been broken by life and somehow found healing in each other and in the unconditional love of a dog who never needed much. Just a place to belong. And now, so did they. The wedding with Bolt in a bow tie. The leaves had just started to turn, painting the small town in warm shades of amber, rust, and gold. The sky was a soft canvas of blue, brushed with the wisps of passing clouds. It was the kind of day where everything felt still, like time had decided to slow down, just for a little while. In the center of the town's park, beneath a canopy of old trees, white folding chairs lined either side of a grassy aisle. A few paper lanterns swayed gently in the breeze. Nothing was extravagant, no crystal chandeliers or designer centerpieces. Just heart, just family, just love. Daniel stood at the front, adjusting his collar with nervous hands. His suit was simple, borrowed, and slightly snug at the shoulders, but he wore it with quiet dignity. His eyes kept drifting to the crowd of neighbours and library friends, all gathered with warm smiles and tissue-clutching hands. But what he waited for most wasn't the guests or the officiant. It was her. And then the music began, soft strings from a local trio playing under an oak, and the moment shifted. First came Emma, wearing a little white dress with a yellow ribbon tied around her waist. She scattered petals with exaggerated flair, giggling as they floated behind her like confetti. The whole crowd chuckled warmly. Next came Bolt. He trotted down the aisle with the poise of a gentleman, a black bow tie clipped neatly to his collar. He was older now, his muzzle speckled with grey, but he carried himself with quiet pride, like he knew exactly what today meant. Every eye turned to him, every heart melted. And when he reached Daniel, he sat down with a small woof, tail thumping against the earth. Then Lily. She walked slowly, her hand resting lightly in the crook of an old friend's arm. Her dress flowed like poetry, simple, elegant, with a lace hem that caught the sunlight. Her hair was swept gently off her face, and her eyes, those eyes that had once held so much ache, now shimmered with peace. Daniel's breath caught in his chest. Because she wasn't just beautiful, she was real. The woman who had faced the world's storms and still chose love. The woman who returned to make things right, not just for herself but for the dog she loved, and the man she came to love without even planning to. She reached him, smiled softly, and took his hands. The ceremony was short, the vows even shorter. Daniel promised loyalty, patience, and a heart that would always try, even when life got hard again. Lily promised honesty, compassion, and to never walk away from what mattered. And when it came time for the rings, it was Emma who stepped up, her tiny hands cupped around a velvet box, and Bolt who barked at just the right moment, making the entire park laugh through their tears. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant said. "You may kiss." But Daniel was already pulling Lily into his arms, kissing her gently, reverently. Like he was kissing not just his wife, but the past goodbye. Like he was kissing every day of hardship, loneliness, and waiting. And thanking it for leading him here. Applause rang out. Emma jumped up and down, spinning in her dress. Bolt barked twice, wagging his tail like he understood exactly what had just happened. And in that quiet park, under those amber leaves, a family that had once been scattered came together, stitched by love, second chances, and a dog's quiet loyalty. Afterward, the reception was held on picnic tables covered in checkered cloths. Kids played tag between trees. Neighbours passed around homemade pies. Emma danced barefoot in the grass. Daniel couldn't stop smiling. Lily sat beside him, her head resting on his shoulder, her hand intertwined with his. "I used to think success was about money," she whispered. He glanced down at her. "And now?" he asked. She looked at Emma, at Bolt snoozing nearby in his bow tie, at the warm circle of people who had once been strangers but now clapped and sang and danced like family. "Now I know it's about moments," she said, "the kind you never forget." Daniel nodded, pulling her a little closer, and as the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the park, one thing became clear. The man who had once lost everything had gained more than he ever dreamed. The woman who once left a note behind now wrote a new story, with love at its centre, and the dog who had waited quietly for someone to come back had brought them all home. Not with words, not with wealth, but with a bow tie, a wagging tail, and the kind of loyalty that changes lives forever. The lesson behind the bow tie. As the last light faded from the autumn sky, the laughter of children still echoed across the park. There were no chandeliers, no grand toasts, no glittering spotlight, but in that simple celebration something far more valuable had been found: a family. Daniel, the man who once had nothing but broken dreams and quiet strength, stood tall, not because of success, but because of love. He raised Emma on resilience and bedtime stories, carrying his burdens in silence so she could grow in joy. Emma, the little girl who grew up in hand-me-downs and second-hand books, was never poor in love. She found her best friend in a puppy on a cold winter night, and years later opened her heart wide enough to let someone new in. Lily, the woman who once walked away from everything she loved just to survive, returned not with fanfare but with humility, grace, and the courage to stay. She didn't just find her lost dog, she found her people. She found home. And Bolt, the silent thread that wove their hearts together. A dog who waited at a bus stop with a note, who healed a grieving father and made a little girl laugh. A dog who, without ever saying a word, reminded us what loyalty, love, and second chances truly look like. This story isn't just about a wedding or a reunion. It's about destiny, how it sometimes bends us, breaks us, and then brings us back to where we were always meant to be. It's about hope, the kind that flickers quietly in the darkest moments, waiting to be seen. And it's about family, not built by blood, but by choice, kindness, and the promise that no one is ever truly alone. So here's what we take from this journey. Sometimes life doesn't give us what we want. It gives us what we need. Sometimes the note we leave behind leads us exactly where we belong. And sometimes love shows up in the form of a trembling puppy who wears a bow tie on your wedding day. Because when hearts are true and love is patient, even the coldest bus stops can lead to warm, forever homes.